reaction to that is, well, where are we going to get the money? How are we going to take care of the elderly? How are we going to take care of the medical needs of the people who are so dependent? Well, there is a way. Save it from fighting these senseless wars. We literally could save $500 billion very easily. You could take half of that and put it against the deficit, and you'd have more than enough to tide people over and work a transitional program in order to get to a more sensible government and programs that we need. And this to me has great appeal. It's logical, it's practical, and it's moving in the right direction. You can't turn one switch and turn every single thing off in one day because it would be chaotic. But the direction that we're going, it could be turned off dramatically. What happens when you have runaway inflation and the destruction of the dollar? All these programs are out the window, and this country will be in chaos. And that's what we have to work to prevent.
That's right.
You know, over the years, and one of the strongest motivations I had in the early 70s to enter politics had to do with the economy and sound money. This is the reason that I looked to the Constitution, and lo and behold, we're in this inflationary mess and all this debt because we did not follow the law. Right. And the law says only gold and silver should be legal tender. Moral reason is an economic reason, but one of the really major reasons why we have to reject this monetary system, it is the vehicle that allows governments to grow in a very seductive manner. It allows politicians to spend to satisfy the demands of people who believe they're getting something for nothing, and they spend the money, they tax us to the hilt, and then they turn around and borrow to the hilt, and then they turn around and still don't have enough, and then they start printing the money. And it allows government to grow. It's deceitful because it delays the payment. It literally can delay it for decades, and the consequences come later. And it also makes the victims invisible. We don't know exactly who the victims will be, but most of the time it's always the middle class and the poor who are trying to pay the bills and struggle because they get hit with an inflation rate much higher than anybody else. Everybody's inflation rate is not the same. So the average person that has to spend their money on survival, they spend money on things like fuel and food, but they exclude that when they talk about the inflationary rate in the nation, claiming there's no significant inflation. They claim it's at 2%. So can we trust the government to tell us the truth about inflation? But eventually, though, when the revolution really comes, we will have a new monetary system, and it will be an honest monetary system, and we will not allow the politicians in collusions with the secrecy of the Federal Reserve to create money out of thin air in order for them to maintain power. The declaration of emergencies and the fear built up with a crisis and the need for the safety net economically and the need to make us all safe because there's a great threat of terrorism means the people are supposed to be complacent and willing to give up their liberties. Of course, that we reject. But what has happened since 9/11? Even though we've had an attack on our civil liberties off and on and steadily, especially for the last 100 years, we have had a tremendous attack here in the last, since 9/11, the last 6 years. So this is the reason that we could start off with an early proposal in the next administration, that being ours. We should... start by repealing the Patriot Act. We could get rid of the Military Commissions Act. We could restore the principle of habeas corpus. We could suspend all efforts for the national ID card. And we could suspend all warrantless searches on the American people. And we could restore the basic principle of the founders and our original intent of the Constitution, and that is the purpose of the Constitution is to restrain the government, not to restrain the people. The purpose of a true and honest government should be there to protect your privacy, not the secrecy of the government. These ideas are not complicated. We got there by the mere rejection of the rule of law. We can return to the rule of law. Almost every answer can be found in our Constitution. But this whole idea that the Constitution is so casually rejected by our leaders in Washington, and I'm not talking about just the executive branch. It's the executive branch, it's the congressional branch, the executive branch, the legislative branch, as well as the judicial branch. They have no respect for the rule of law. When we were in the process of transferring illegally the authority to go to war from the legislative branch to the president, I suggested strongly suggested by offering an amendment to that and saying, if you want to go to war, referring to my colleagues on the committee, you should do it in a proper manner. You should declare the war up and down. If it's necessary for our national security reasons, we should go all out, win it, and get it over with and come home. But it was explained to me rather emphatically that that part of the Constitution was anachronistic and we don't follow it anymore. And they also said that, Congressman Paul, that is a frivolous notion to bring up in the Congress. And also they said it was very impractical. So going to war without a declaration to enforce UN resolutions and to get rid of weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist, that, they claim, is practical. But nevertheless, it was all politics because the Congress themselves were not capable of assuming the responsibility which is put on them by the Constitution. And now what are they doing? They're hurrying around, scurrying around. Those who endorse the war are rejecting the war, and now we're having a debate. These many, many years too late. And the notion about going to war is so serious that we should never do it with an outright debate by the people and through the Congress and going through deliberately. So this whole idea of going to war uselessly and carelessly could be avoided. You know, immediately after World War II, we embarked on the wrong direction. I mean, what an example to set in the early 50s, going to war against Korea under UN resolutions. We should never even be in the United Nations. Since that time, we've been in so many fights, whether the big ones, of course, have been Korea and Vietnam and now the Persian Gulf War. Quite frankly, the Persian Gulf War has been going on since the early 1990s. And it continues to go on because, you know, sometimes they claim, and some believe it, I assume, that they really want to promote, you know, American goodness. But, you know, do you think that oil might well have been a motive on their part? Yes, I think so. I think oil very much is involved. So the whole thing over there is not as complicated as they would like to make it seem, it's not nearly as noble as they would want us to think. But, you know, they keep telling us that if we leave, there's going to be chaos. But what did they tell us for all those years we were in Vietnam? They said, oh, you can't leave. There's the domino theory. China's going to take over the world. Here, what has happened? China's become more capitalistic and it looks like they're taking over the world. You know?